His faded eyes are open. They look remarkably alive. The expression on his face is gentle and relaxed. The beard trimmed, the hair combed. Some have even cut off a few of his curls as a souvenir. They made every effort to make him recognizable, hiding the bullet wounds in his arms, legs, and the fatal one in his chest, making it look as if he had died in a battle. The famous Commandante Che Guevara. Che went by many names. In La Paz, he called himself Adolfo Mena Gonzalez, and in the jungle he was called Fernando or Ramon by his comrade. Che he was called because in the Argentine habit he constantly used the filler word Che, which simply means hey you, yet he was born Ernesto Guevara de la Serna in Argentina. As a young boy, Ernesto always seeks danger and the impossible. Although asthmatic, he climbs bridges and trees and fights with the neighborhood children. As medical student, he hitchhikes across the country and later travels the entire continent on a motorbike. On his travels, he became more and more devoted to Marxism, began to admire Stalin, and came up with one solution to the conflicts on the planet: world revolution. He is drawn to Guatemala and observes how the Americans under Eisenhower want to overthrow the leftist colonel Jacobo Árbenz Guzmán, because he wants to take the land of the American companies and nationalize it. Many young leftists are revolting against this, including some Cuban exiles living in Guatemala. They are comrade in arms of a lawyer who is in prison in Cuba, sentenced to 15 years for trying to overthrow the dictator Fulgencio Batista. Fidel Castro. Che is electrified by the mood in Guatemala. At night, while a CIA-backed army drops bombs on Guatemala City, he tries to get through to President Árbenz. But before he can help him, Árbenz is overthrown. While the putschist and dictator Carlos Castillo Armas comes to power in Guatemala, Che goes to Mexico. It is here that the fateful meeting between Che and Fidel takes place. Fidel has been pardoned in the meantime, but he still wants to overthrow Batista. And to do this, he wants to train a guerrilla force in Mexico for the invasion. Fidel asks El Che to join the group, and he would accompany them as a doctor. Che, the adventurer who seeks danger, agrees. In 1956, the group lands in Cuba. Che soon asserts himself as the leader of his own little troop. He often shows himself to be unyielding and uncompromising. Although he is a doctor and concerned for the safety of his people, he acts so harshly that he shoots traitors himself. Fidel appoints Che to the rank of Commandante, the major rank in the rebel army. Until this point, only Fidel himself has held this rank. And against all odds, the guerrillas win. In 1959, the dictator Batista flees to the USA. Che now becomes commander of a military fortress, president of the National Bank, and finally minister of industry in Cuba's new socialist government. And Che is fully absorbed in his role. It is he who negotiates a treaty with the Kremlin in 1962 to station nuclear missiles in Cuba, and this led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. When Khrushchev and JFK reach an agreement to prevent a Third World War, Che rages that the missiles should have been detonated. Here it becomes clear what actually drives Che. He feels cold hatred for the Yankees, the Americans, but he also partly contradicts Soviet doctrine, because if he would have his way, it is not a party that should be the head of the proletariat, but the guerrillas. Che wants to take the class struggle into the world. First he tries it in Argentina, then even in Congo in 1965, but the attempt to export the Cuban Revolution to Africa fails. Together with Fidel's Secret Service, Che decides to prove his doctrine of guerrilla warfare in a new place, Bolivia. True to his motto, create 2, 3, many Vietnams. For here in Bolivia, Che wants to create a new Vietnam, a costly war in which the Americans are brought to their knees by guerrillas. And if Moscow would join them, that's Che's plan, a world war would break out that would defeat imperialism in its nest. The plan begins with Che having his head hair pulled out one by one so that he can travel to La Paz with a half-bald head, glasses, and a false passport under the name of Adolfo Mena Gonzalez. From here on, he has 11 months to live. Che and his men are given a piece of land for their base camp, which is anything but well chosen. Located in the middle of Bolivia's wilderness, even the Bolivians in the group get lost in the mountains. For his guerrilla tactics, Che needs the support of the population, but almost no one lives here. Besides, the miners he wanted to agitate are hundreds of kilometers away, behind the top of the Andes, and Che falls out with Monge, the leader of the Communist Party in Bolivia, but he still wants to try to repeat the Cuban success in Bolivia. To do this, he wants to take time to build up a guerrilla army, but in 1967 the Bolivian army discovered the camp, yet they did not know who the inhabitants really are. As a result, the first victims are not even the work of the enemy but of the rain season. 2 men of Che's group do not fall in battle but drown in mountain rivers. Soon 2 more men desert. They head for the army and now reveal who the men in the mountains are and what their goal is. It's Che Guevara. He wants to start a guerrilla war in their country. Now the Bolivian army seals off the vast area, and Che and his men are on their own, and from now on they are on the run through the Bolivian wilderness. 2 of his men, whom Che sends away to get support, run directly into the arms of the army. They too betray him more than they actually should. Bolivian government leader Barrientos has the guerrillas proclaimed agents of Castro communism on the radio, and Che realizes that the indigenous peasants have by no means been waiting for him to liberate them. In fact, many of them share the nationalism of the military. Thus, he cannot hope for any support from the farmers. He and his men now fight their way through the forests on the run with machetes. Their only goal, bare survival. Although they have hardly any food and drink, Che still finds the strength to write about socialist economics at night. But his hope of a second Vietnam is shattered. At the beginning of August 1967, Che is only a shadow of his former self. His asthma robs him of his last strength. He even gets a liver colic. Any possibility of communication with Fidel is lost with the loss of his tape recorder. Now there's total isolation in the forest. And the circle of the Bolivian army is now tightening around Che's group. In fact, they are already competing to see who gets to hunt down the Commandante. On the morning of the 8th of October 1967, Che and his remaining 16 men discover soldiers. A farmer have given away their position and they are trapped. In the exchange of fire, Che is hit in the leg. Another bullet destroys his rifle. He is now captured, and the Bolivian Revolution, which has barely begun, is brought to an end. Che is then interrogated, and what follows can no longer be clearly explained because the reports of those present contradict each other. What is certain is that around noon, the order comes from La Paz to kill Che, and no one, including the CIA, raises an objection. He still tells his executioner that he would prefer to stand for what is coming and tells him, "I know you are here to kill me. Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." These were the last words of Commandante Che Guevara. He once said, "In the revolution, one wins or dies." Shot in the chest, Che dies on the 9th October 1967 at 1:10 p.m. at the age of 39. And although the Bolivian government does its best to keep him from becoming a martyr by having his body kept hidden, that's exactly what happens. Che becomes immortal. The man who wanted to create many Vietnams becomes the icon of a youth movement that protests worldwide against the Vietnam War. This year, Che would have celebrated his 95th birthday. His myth and the saying "Hasta la victoria siempre" has survived. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in more interesting stories of history, please click here.